y'all, it's Laura, and welcome back to a Coco Vanilla Studio layout featuring these 4 adorable photos of my youngest daughter. And they're from 2014, so they're back a little ways. And I'm going to be using the absolutely stunning Sunkissed collection for these splashing in the water table photos. Now these are very summery photos, which I thought worked really well with the Sunkissed collection. And I'm going to be bringing in circles. Now I'm a big fan of geometric shapes in my layouts, and circles happen to be one of my favorites, one of my go-tos, if you will. And initially I thought I was going to take this in a diagonal flow from the bottom left corner up to the top right. So you will see me start working toward that design, but it does change over time, and I left that process in so you could see that not every layout is perfect from the beginning or is perfectly planned. Sometimes they change and modify quite a bit over the course of the design. Now I'm grabbing some scrap papers from the Sunkissed collection and just picking several different colors. I have grabbed this white polka dot, which has all of the other colors that I'm incorporating, and this helps it feel more cohesive. We have a good mix of colors here. So I'm going to put the blue circle at the bottom, the painty circle in the center, and the white with the polka dot at the top. Now eventually that white polka dot's going to move to the left corner and we'll get more of a vertical flow. But this is how I started. This was the initial idea. And this idea would have been fine, but to my eye it was a little bit off. It just didn't feel quite right. So I'm going to grab those papers back using my 1" and I think it's a 2.5" punch. And I'm going to go ahead and punch out several of these papers, even going off the edge, so that I can just tuck them in at the edge of the papers or behind the circles and not waste paper. So I loved the wavy teal background of this pattern paper. I thought it was perfect for a water table layout. Just had that really water theme going on in the background. Even though my photos don't have a large amount of teal in them, they hardly have any. Because I'm bringing in so many other colors on the background, it doesn't really matter that the background itself doesn't tie in with my photos. I'm really focusing on my photos filling that background. So really it's just a placeholder, and I see it as one solid color, as if you would use it as cardstock. And that's just the way that I view it. So I'm grabbing lots of other colors to add into these smaller circles. As you can see, it gets a little frantic. It gets a little wild with the mix of colors and patterns. And you might be thinking it's a little disconnected, but keep in mind, these photos are going to cover up a lot of this background. There's 4 photos, and they started out 3x4. I have trimmed some of them down just to give myself a variety of sizes and make sure the focus is in on my daughter and that they'll fit on this 9x12 layout. So don't worry too much about the background. It comes together in the end, and while it may feel a little bit frantic, you have to remember that once you add all of the embellishments and the photos and all of the tiny little detail pieces, the layout's going to look completely different than how it starts out. So here's the point at which I realized I really don't love the diagonal flow. And I think it had more to do with my photos than it did with the background. Very carefully peeling up the 1 circle I had managed to tape down already, and then just bringing in the others to create this vertical flow down the left side of the layout. What I really thought about these photos is that they would look better if they were staggered top to bottom instead of on a diagonal. And you'll see when I place them back on top of my circles, this works a whole lot better. It feels a lot more cohesive with both the photos and the circles and the way they peek out from behind the photos. It just works better. And you have to play sometimes. You have to experiment a little bit and see what you like, what you don't like. If it's just not working, don't tape everything down yet and just start playing with it. Start to pull your photos into a different direction. Maybe pick a different background paper. Whatever it is that doesn't feel like it makes sense. So now that I have decided where my photos are going to go, I'm going to bring in some beautiful embellishments. So I have a condiment tray here to my left. This is what I use for my embellishments. I have some fussy cut florals in the top compartment. I have some cut aparts and the pocket page cards in the center, and then I have the embellishment pack, the ephemera pack, at the bottom. And I'm just picking through. I'm trying to use a lot of the very summery themed items because these are not things that I generally would pull into a layout otherwise. But when she's in her swimsuit, obviously it's summer and there's water involved, I'm taking that opportunity to pull in as many beach themed, super summery themed items as possible and not worrying too much about them being perfectly themed to what is happening in the photos. As long as the general idea or the feeling that the photos create when you look at them is captured in that embellishing, then I'm a happy camper. And in this case, we are definitely out in the beautiful sunshine, so I'm going to get this sun on here. I've got these little trees popped on here. Are we on a tropical location? No, of course not. We're in my backyard in Mississippi. But I do think these photos really capture a lot of fun, summer, and just a really excited baby. And so those are the kind of themes that I'm trying to capture with my embellishing. I try a lot of different things. The love this, I move around all over the page. It does end up going right back to where it started next to those trees, but I try a bunch of different locations. And Missy Whidden calls this auditioning, and I think that's a beautiful word for it. I think you do need to try things, see what your mind clicks with, what works, and generally it's best to trust your first gut reaction. Most of the time, I end up putting my embellishments back where they started. So if something looks right away and you move it around and it just doesn't look as good there, go back to where you started. Sometimes your gut feeling the first time out is the best place to put things. So I am going to try several different places. I'm going to tuck in these little word phrases in between some of the photos of the top 3. And then I'm going to add a journaling spot at the bottom left in the blue circle. That blue circle was standing out quite a lot. So I knew I was going to make sure that it faded in the background a little bit. Now, one of the things that I had challenged myself personally with this layout was not to go crazy with the florals. I have a tendency to lean heavily on florals. And so I decided with this layout to see how many of the other embellishments that I could get on here before reaching for the florals. So you'll see that I wait to the very end and just tuck in just a few little bits and pieces to kind of round out and finish off the layout. I especially thought it was cute to get these little orange and pineapple pieces up here at the top. I thought that was nice. The green ties in beautifully with the grass in the background of my photos. The yellow ties in with the photos as well. So even though these photos have absolutely nothing to do with fruit, they have a summery feel, and I'm just going for it. And I would encourage you to do that as well. Just try putting things on that aren't perfectly attuned to the theme or the photos themselves and see if you like it. It takes a bit of practice and it takes a bit of a challenging yourself to do it if you're uncomfortable or if you're a more literal scrapbooker, which I normally am. And but I really like how it turned out, and I think it was a great use of those palm trees in particular. So now I've got the cut aparts in hand and pocket pages, and I wanted to use this journaling spot as a circle into the blue at the bottom left. So I found a little embellishment container on my desk, and I'm going to use that for an impromptu circle. It's not a perfect circle, but it'll do the job. It's going to be tucked in at the top and the right anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to fit. So that was the plan. Use what you have on your desk. You don't need any special tools. No special tools were used in the creation of this layout other than a couple of punches. And I don't know, I just don't consider that a special tool. So trimming it down, I'm going to go ahead and tape that in off camera. That will be where I put my journaling, talking about how much my daughter really enjoyed this water table. And then I'm going to reach for my florals, so we're coming to the end. I decided to tuck in a couple of florals, especially the smaller ones that I cut from the 6x8 paper pad. So I've tucked a small one next to each of the photos, and these are just going to kind of peek out in awkward places. I use these to fill in the gaps between some of the photos and some of the circles. And this space is typically called trapped space. So it's space that is in between two different elements and seems to stand out a bit too much, draws a little bit too much attention to itself. So the trapped space is what I'm trying to fill in, and then I'm going to add some tiny little detail pieces florals mostly, that I have fussy cut out of that smaller paper pad, and dot those around the page as well, just to add a little extra something something. Something to make them stand out, something to make them feel finished and complete, and that is always my favorite part of scrapping. Adding those tiny little details, you'll see these small flowers dotted around my clusters, and I really think this adds a nice finishing touch. Now I did decide that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and glue it down off camera. Coming back in with my small title, it will go just there, and adding in some Nuvo as well as some Heidi Swapp Color Shine splatters around the outside, and this layout will be complete. Be sure to check out the Cocoa Vanilla blog to see some close-up shots and a more detailed explanation of this layout as it comes together, and that's at cocoavanilla.com.au. And here's the splattering. One thing about splattering, be sure to cover your photos. I'm not always good about doing that, and sometimes it gets on your photos, and it's not always great to have a big gold splat in the middle of someone's face. So I do try with my hand to at least attempt to cover up my photos a little bit. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, bye!